Just see.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take form as your reality is adjusted.
There's the lag again because I switched tabs. Really typical. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again. Another edition of Sol Excalibre on this moon day evening. I'll do the same as I did last broadcast. I apologise in advance for coughing and spluttering if I do. But don't forget, remain indoors. Yes, I might cough and splutter a bit. I am getting better, and thanks to everyone for the well wishes, for those that posted them. Oh, and we'll see how we go. If I run out of breath or run out of energy, then I'll just call it early and we'll leave it for the rest of the evening. But for now, I will carry on as best I can. I've mostly got my voice back, and I've mostly got my breath enough to be able to talk for at least a few minutes. So in the usual fashion, yeah, I think that's enough of that. We'll get to some of that in a bit, because I want to talk about a couple of other things that have been happening sort of in the background while the news media is obsessed with the chronic virus. I've been thinking I might call it the chronic virus instead, rather than the coronavirus. So I'm just flicking through screens and tabs as I usually do, so I can check everything. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Nika Chief, hello. And lots of Tatro, hello. Thanks for joining us. I will get into why in the subtitle this week for this episode I put the party of the dirty third part, or the dirty turd, the party of the turd part. It all hopefully makes sense as I get into it. And most of what I want to talk about and point at, and the thread, as I often try and do on these broadcasts, is talk about the larger arcs and threads of what's going on in geopolitics, global politics, national politics, etc. What's going on in the world, basically. The larger threads of what has been building up for a few years, and now we've got to 2020. A lot of it is starting to be birthed. I think we've got past the crowning of the head, if you think of it in that metaphor as a birth of a child. The birthing of this new world order, new age, or new world for the ages, etc., etc. I think we're getting past the crowning now. Now they're starting to reveal the face of that newly born child. A lot of different agendas have started coming together, and the threads have started linking together, such that now, rather than, as I have done in the past with a lot of these broadcasts, and the ones I did prior to it becoming Sol Excalibre, talking about the potential conspiracies and theories and ideas about what might be happening in the near future. Well, now we are in that near future, and a lot of these things that 20 years ago would have been considered outright conspiracy speculation are now being proved to be fact. So rather than feeling a need to talk about the potential conspiracies and ideas along with them, I'd rather point at things that are clear examples now of how you can see this new paradigm emerging and being revealed around you. A lot of it doesn't need to be hidden anymore, even though they often obfuscate it. They try and disguise it a little bit so that most of the public is kept ignorant or distracted or can't quite make out what it is because the image is still a bit fuzzy or blurry, that kind of fog of illusion. Yeah, I think there's been quite a few things happening over the last several months from last year into this year where a lot of these things now are starting to be revealed for what they are. If people can get past the denial of being able to call these things out for what they actually are. And that connects into a subject that I've often talked about, that kind of death of the paradigm being like to a real death or a real experience of bereavement, that for many people, they find it difficult to just let go of something that has obviously been taken away from them or killed off, that old paradigm of how we used to live, and it's being replaced with something new. And they find it difficult to accept the loss of something, and therefore are unable to see it for what it is. They're still stuck in a denial loop where they keep going back to their abuser to say, please, what's going on? Why do I feel so ill? Why am I being injured? Why am I being stolen from, etc., etc.? And the abuser just keeps telling them the same tale of, oh, it wasn't us. It was those other people over there. Gaslighting the public en masse. But anyway, yeah, to get into it, in the subtitle, the party of the dirty turd part. This is a method and a tactic that seems to have become much more relied upon in contemporary times, in these modern ages. I was just talking with the guys beforehand and saying, look, I could easily say this is from my perspective, my experience, my life experience gives me this certain angle of perspective. But for me, it was from the beginnings of the New Labour, which is back into the 90s, and the Blairite regime, etc., and how he introduced this, or reintroduced, relabeled and redescribed something that they'd been working on for a long time. Not just Labour, the whole group of cabal of controllers, of the aristocracy establishment, etc., etc. Something that they've been working towards is that technocratic, socialistic dystopia that many people confuse for communism. You've either got to have outright capitalism or you have outright communism. There's nothing in between, mate. It's not allowed. Whereas Blair and his entourage of spin doctors quite successfully portrayed a different perspective to the public of the third way, and how we could have a public-private partnership that in effect gave us socialism light, is the way maybe you could describe it now. They didn't use that kind of terminology back then because they were still trying to keep people distracted from the middle ground political ideology that could be labelled as socialism. But anyway, yeah, before I get too distracted into talking about political bullshit, the point was, in my experience, that concept of the third way and the public-private partnership ideas that made it sound like the New Labour were giving power back to the public after our multi-term subjection to the Conservative Party under Thatcher and all the various effects that had, which are still happening now. They're still rolling on now. A lot of the plans and agendas that she enacted are still playing out there. But the New Labour presented it in a way that made it seem like power was being given back to the public again. This idea of public-private partnership. Whereas really the obfuscation that they were playing and the trickery that they were playing was that the public ownership of certain elements of society's infrastructure, for many of you who are old enough to remember that far back, you're talking about the kind of utilities, like water and gas and electrical supplies and things like that. They were being transferred into private ownership. basically, that's what it resulted in. It was just the same kind of policy that Conservatives had enacted for multiple years. But it was the transfer of publicly owned assets, or what used to be publicly owned assets, controlled or governed by the incumbent government of whatever term. They were gradually being transferred to private ownership. But the public was sold this idea of, oh, it'll be this public-private partnership. You'll still have a say. You can buy shares in the company, so you still in effect own it. So in other words, you paid for it twice. Your taxes paid for it when it was a national asset, and now you've been persuaded to pay for it again by buying shares in the new privatized version of it. But this was all based on a methodology of separating the bureaucratic elements of government, which includes the political faces that appear for the party politics kind of stuff, from the actual operation of societal infrastructures, such as water supply, utility supply, road networks, bin collection, etc. That enabled the government to have a degree of separation, which meant that policies that they then wanted to enact, that they knew the general public would not exactly be happy about, or maybe even outright against, could be buffered through that third party interference in that middle ground. So the third party, where it's not only talking about Blairite ideas of the third way and the third place and things like that, which as a hermetic principle can be used to your benefit. That kind of concept of the third can be very beneficial. And in natural reality, the third is very important in the whole structure of the way reality works. But for them, it was this ability to have a buffer ground, almost like a no man's land, where plausible deniability was quite easy to garner, and sidestepping any culpability or liability as a result of the policies that you pass through that third party, they can be avoided. The government is not responsible because there was this private third party company that was supposedly contracted to provide a service or access to a utility, so it's their fault. Oh, it's just the fallibility of people. It was incompetence in the company. It was corner cutting and things like, think of the Grenfell fire incident and how they can, and they have been, playing out this avoidance of culpability by claiming that, it's because the industry was cutting corners and the rating of the products being used wasn't up to spec of how it was being installed or the buildings it was being fitted on, etc. Excuses that just take them out of that chain of liability. So a couple of things to screen share to try and explain or help to explain why I'm pointing at this stuff. I need Firefox browser. We might get a little bit of an infinity moment for a while. Start with this story. I saw this thanks to that guy Scott Webb on his channel, because he covers a lot of these stories. He looks out for a lot of these kind of stories and covers them. And I did go and get the actual news article on the Daily Mail. I'm not going to go into all the details or read through it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory just from the headline. Woman who claims she was rushed into taking experimental puberty-blocking drugs at 16 wins right to take NHS gender clinic to court in landmark case. This is the case of a born female who went through something in her prepubescent years that made her feel like she wasn't comfortable in her own skin. So that led to the kind of gender dysphoria that led her to visit the Tavistock Institute, where this kind of question is supposedly being dealt with. And from there, she was rushed through into taking puberty blockers without any knowledge of her parents. So this was done at I suppose you could call a pre-legal age, because she was not a legal adult at the time. She was still a juvenile, but she was prescribed these drugs, puberty blocking drugs, which are basically a form of chemical castration. I know a lot of medical or governmental propagandists would argue that point. Oh, you can't call it that. That is basically what it is. It's chemically castrating because it stops the puberty process, which means they don't fully develop. How else do you describe it other than castration? They stop their development. So she's now, as she got older, decided that she'd made a mistake and now wanting to transition back again to a natural birth sex, and potentially is going to try and sue the Tavistock Institute for what I would describe as railroading her into the process. Now, why am I using this as an example? Two reasons. One, this is a clear example of how the agenda outweighs the actual on-the-ground medical care for the people involved with this kind of question. The agenda is to push the transition and LGBT, pretty much the same thing, concepts and ideas into the youngest generation, in particular the youth generation. The prepubescent preferably is what they want, because then the chemical castration process can be fully enabled. But the agenda is about persuading young people to be so disjointed and disassociated from their physical cells, their natural birth cells, that they would be determined to alter themselves in some fashion, or they certainly wouldn't be interested in what would now be called a cisgender lifestyle, which means you basically prevent them from breeding. One way or another, that's what it comes down to. If they choose to pursue, or they feel that they are homosexual, then they're not likely to have children unless they adopt or use some form of technology to produce a child, which means you have that third party intervention again of an agency, maybe the NHS, that provides that technological required procreation, or they chemically castrate themselves such that they would be incapable of breeding, even if they chose then to be with somebody of the opposite sex. If they were naturally of opposite sex, they could breed naturally, etc., etc. So it's more about precluding the youngest generation's ability to breed naturally. So you're controlling population. In the past, there used to be a certain percentage of the population that would be homosexual for whatever their reasons. They feel that's what they are naturally from being a young child, etc. Whatever. It's not about questioning why people's reasonings are there. But for quite a number of years now, a few decades maybe, at least a couple of decades maybe, there's been a deliberate push towards promoting the idea of being transgender in one form or another, whether that be homosexual or wanting to change your physical self in some fashion. And this is basically eugenics, controlling the desires of young people to be able to have natural procreation processes that do not rely on a third party intervention by the state or private company. Another element about this particular example that I wanted to mention is in the past several months, the Tavistock institution has gained more publicity and has had more flack thrown its direction about this very question, of they seem more concerned with pursuing an agenda than actually helping the individuals directly and helping them resolve whether they genuinely have a desire to go through with this and an awareness of the consequences of their actions by pursuing this process, or whether they just want numbers to make it look like more and more people are wanting to be transsexual, folks. It's trendy now. Everyone wants to do it, thereby supporting and enabling the propaganda agenda to present this idea as being popular amongst the general populace, certainly to the youth of the populace. So they've been receiving a lot of criticism and a lot of questioning, and there's been quite a few whistleblowers. 30 plus people have quit working at that institute over the past 2-3 years because of what they saw occurring there. And some of them have spoken out and said, I quit because it looked like all they cared about was just railroading the kids through so that it adds another number to justify their ideological bullshit. So I find it not unusual timing. It's coincidentally convenient timing that this woman is now coming forward saying she wants to sue the Institute. And I posted a comment under Scott's video suggesting that this could be a deliberate play where they will utilize this case to set a precedent that basically exonerates the institution from any liability of fucking up these kids' lives, of chemically castrating them. This has been done before in the past, where institutions such as this can claim a kind of NGO non-liability because they're only trying to help. It wasn't their fault that mistakes were made. Yeah, and they'll blame it on human fallibility and bureaucracy and problems in the paperwork and not enough funding, and they'll try and call for more support in what they're trying to do. And potentially this could be used as a way of securing the narrative associated with that institute. So in other words, they can play this process out, make it look as though there might have been a few mistakes made here and there, but really the institute is actually trying their hardest to help these kids, and we better leave them alone from now on, and you won't be allowed to prosecute them because they're just carrying out a health procedure process. They are really a third-party private company. But because, and the Tavistock Institute as a whole, not just this particular part of it that deals with gender dysphoria and transitioning, etc., they are very much an NGO institution that has been around for a long time and puts a lot of input via think tanks and study papers into governmental policy. And this is another example of that private-public partnership blurring of the lines, where the corporatist reality of this institution is part and parcel of creating governmental policy, and governmental policy can be passed through this institution to make it look like it is more of a natural emanation from the society that it's part of, and not being driven by a deliberately scripted governmental policy program. This is just one example of direct evidence of eugenics being perpetrated against the public under the disguise of we're just trying to help you, it's for a health service reason. So that's that one. And another one, I suppose I should have just switched tab rather than doing screen share again, but never mind, we'll get there. The other one, which I saw thanks to a channel called Mark My Words, thanks to James, he recommended this channel to me a while ago. This guy covers a lot of the news information coming out about primarily the benefit system, universal credit in particular. He focuses on whenever there's any new reports about that. But it was more just the fact that brought my attention to this article about the DWP, this in the Independent, cover up. DWP destroyed reports into people who killed themselves after benefits were stopped. This is coming on. What was the date on this? I know it wasn't long ago. It was only a few days ago, 5 days ago. Again, I'm not going to read through it. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. The DWP have claimed that it was just, part of the process that they would get rid of those documents. They'll just throw their hands up and claim plausible deniability and incompetence and people making mistakes and all that usual kind of bullshit. But this is something that I know we've talked about on these broadcasts and on the Wednesday night broadcasts over the years. There's been examples of this come up again and again and again. And we've mentioned about how there's been whistleblowers. Sorry. Whistleblowers come out from the DWP talking about the reality of how the benefit claim system has been used to push people off benefits. They're called benefits, but they are legally entitlements, but to remove entitlements from people when there was no legal justification to doing so. And the main reason I wanted to use this one is as an example. One, it's yet again more direct evidence that the government utilizes methodologies that are basically at their core eugenics, but they try and disguise it as human fallibility or mistakes or bureaucratic lag or, just those kind of governmental problems. Oh, we're trying to deal with it, folks. Mistakes have been made, but oh well, never mind. But also because this is another example of direct evidence in front of the public that demonstrate the reality of the policy that is actually being enacted, yet the public seem unable to call it for what it is. They see it as, yet again, it's just more bureaucratic mistakes, the government covering up stuff and, oh, that's naughty, we should, change the policies in some fashion. I've ranted about this multiple times over the last few years, in particular the bullshit that they call austerity, which is still ongoing, don't forget, and the possibilities of them calling for a banker bail-in are still there constantly. They now have the legal ability to be able to do that kind of shit on the public. But anyway, the reality of this is, since Ian Duncan Smith introduced the changes in the benefit system and they brought in a third-party private company, at the time it began with a company called Atos, but they brought in that third party. The dirty third is used as part of that methodology again to remove governmental workers and policy away from any liability or culpability, and gives them that middle ground, plausible deniability. Say, oh well, it wasn't us, it's because the third party company that we'd contracted were too rough, they didn't do their job properly, they made mistakes. It's not our fault, folks, it's not our policy. But the reality is that Ian Duncan Smith, and I'm naming him individually just because he's one individual that can be named, but there would have been other workers within the group that formulated that policy change. They knew full well that some people would die as a result of the policies that they wanted to introduce, the changes that they wanted to introduce. They knew full well that people would die. So how did they avoid, forget the word, how could they avoid the ire of the public seeing that for what it is? they introduced that third party, that public-private partnership where Atos sort of was in a blurry middle ground of it is actually a third-party private company, but it's operating almost like an NGO because it's providing a societal infrastructure service that would normally be provided by the DWP, the actual Department of Work and Pensions that is part of the governmental bureaucratic body. But so that the public could not pursue any liability or culpability as the consequences that result from these policy changes, you have that third party buffer. And as has gone over, as has played out over the last few years, Atos no longer provides that service. It's now provided by a different company because Atos didn't do a very good job, which is the complete inversion of the truth. Atos did a very good job pursuing the policy that the government wanted, which was to get rid of a lot of people who were on the books, on the numbers, in receipt of entitlements for one reason or another, particularly those who were either long-term sick or disabled, in receipt of what's now called PIP, personal independence payment, what used to be called disability benefit. All those numbers, they wanted to be rid of them. That's dead wood, useless eaters. And in this new environment of the corporatist dystopian system that is trying to grind towards efficiency, units that do not input into the system are a waste, so they need removing. When an engineer designs a system, the system is not complete until any extraneous parts of the system have been removed. In other words, the process that the engine is meant to perform has been refined to such a degree that there is maximum efficiency. There is no waste, there is no loss. I know you get into arguments about Newton's laws and whatever and all that kind of stuff, but as a metaphor, just as an analogy, the system is constantly grinding towards efficiency. So they wanted rid of a lot of that dead wood as their new policies defined it. But they knew that if they did it directly, there would be a direct public backlash. There was in the beginnings quite a lot of protests and backlash against it, but it has now been going on for a number of years and it has become so ingrained into modern UK society that people have learnt to buffer it because they don't have any expectation anymore that this situation can be resolved to any genuine good benefit of the people involved. This is a eugenics policy being enacted by government using the disguise and the obfuscation of a third party involvement. So the DWP can quite happily destroy documents that would prove that it was obvious to anyone that wasn't a dumb idiot that the way some people got treated or were treated just as a standard of the way the system now operates were pushed to the edge such that they took their own lives, or they were put into such a situation that they deteriorated and died for some associated reasons, such as the one guy who was in the news a few weeks ago that died of starvation. They knew full well the results of what they were enacting. But this is where I come back to now a lot of this kind of evidence has been building up for a number of years, and a lot of these agendas are starting to come to a confluence and be revealed for what they are. A good portion of the populace still seems unable to be able to call these things out for what they are. These are policies of eugenics, to stop you breeding and to kill off the dead wood, to shed those that do not add into the system as they want it to be, as they are trying to build it. well, mostly finishing off that construction there. Stop screen sharing that. I think that gets the point across. Like I say, you find those articles and read them for yourselves if you really want the details, but there's not exactly a lot of extra detail beyond what's explained in just the title alone. So it now brings me to what's been the main news of the last few weeks, the chronic virus, the coronavirus. Share that link above. Which one? Sorry. I can't click on it as a link in this chat room. I will come back to that in one sec. All right, there we go now. Oh, if it will let me click on it. The chronic virus. I'm not sure if it was on Wednesday's reality chat or the last broadcast I did where I was running out of breath rapidly, so I couldn't exactly talk at length. I still can't really, but I'm waiting for it to load, Taz. It's been really slow, so I'll come back to it in a sec. A lot of the situation around the viral outbreak, whether it had been coronavirus, as they now call it COVID-19, or it had been some other illness, the point was that it makes a very good excuse to enable a lot of the desires or goals of the agendas that have been building up. And that is the curtailing of movement of people unless they're being surveilled. So in other words, if you've got the right papers, the right passes, then you will be allowed through the checkpoint and you will be checked and monitored and tracked as where you're moving from and to and stuff like that. But also in particular and highly relevant at the moment is the control and curtailing of the movement of information. Whether that be discussion, debate and questions over, well, what exactly is the coronavirus? Is it even real? Whatever. It won't let me look at the article properly, it does for some reason. Is this even a real site? News Hopper. News Shopper. A devastated elderly Catford woman finds do not resuscitate order placed in her files. Right, okay, I get you. So similar to kind of like the care pathway examples. Hang on, I'll see if I can screen share it just so everybody knows what the hell it is I'm talking about. This was the link from the article Taz just put in the side chat. Yeah, an example of the care pathways, which is something, again, that seemed to have just got forgotten or quickly stepped over by a lot of the population. They have been enacting care pathways within the NHS where basically they just starve people to death. They're written off as being what they call CTD, circling the drain. They're too close to death for us to bother spending money on them, basically. So they'll be put on a list where they'll gradually be dehydrated and starved to death. And this is something that's been happening for quite a number of years here in the UK, probably going back at least a couple of decades when a lot of the information started to be revealed. Again, another example of policy of eugenics being obfuscated in the general media such that a large portion of the public are convinced that it's just mistakes, fallibility, bureaucracy problems, whatever. The reality is it is a policy of eugenics. So, yeah, to bring me up to date with the chronic virus and why I felt the talking about the concept of the third party or the intervention of the third party is used as a methodology to disguise the reality of the policies that they are enacting such that the general populace, to use a derogatory way to describe it, the mass of the herd remain blind to the abattoir that they are being herded into. And saying that, I'm not trying to suggest that the chronic virus, the coronavirus, is something that's going to decimate us. I don't know. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of debate to be had about whether it is actually a real thing unto itself, or whether they are just riding the back of the flu season and using the people getting everyday flu, influenza each year as an excuse to say, oh, look, that one's got COVID-19, oh, better put them in quarantine. And that just gives them a number to put on a list to make it look like there actually is a viral outbreak. I think it's more likely that there probably is something out there, but whether it is potentially as actually dangerous or globally risky as they claim, that's where I start to highly debate the question, because, and I'm leaving that on the screen deliberately as an example of the fear propaganda that is being ramped up in most countries. When I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I said the very fact that the majority of countries, certainly the big players all around the world, have all joined in on this narrative. As soon as China announced it, they were all like, oh yeah, we better do something, hadn't we? Oh yeah, start doing this, start doing that. Was an acknowledgement that they are all in agreement on the narrative being used. Because it's beneficial to any government to have a method of fear to curtail the activity of their populace. And this is something I was talking about before. The medical implications of a viral outbreak such as this perfectly suit the agendas to set up a more controlled environment within society. The control of movement, the tracking of everybody to make sure they can track who has got the virus, who's a super spreader. You're a super spreader, you better be self-quarantined then. All these things benefit a lot of the agendas that they've been working towards for the past few decades. The control of information and the control of sharing of information via modern technologies such as the internet. The control of the use of cash and free trade. There's so many different things that can quite easily be all managed under the banner of the fear of such a viral outbreak. If it was really as dangerous as they portray it with the fear porn, then they would be making a hell of a lot more effort to actually curtail the movement of it. So in other words, they would be shutting down airports, they would be stopping international flights and trade, etc. But they're not. They're dragging their feet. I listened today to a few hours earlier to Boris Bojo making an announcement that, oh yeah, the UK probably will start to see more of a significant effect of the chronic virus now. So we're prepared. We've had our Cobra meeting. We're going to start, taking more action to deal with the spread of this. So in other words, they're going to start enacting on things that they mentioned over the last few weeks, such as they have the legal power to detain and quarantine anyone that they suspect of carrying the virus. They also claim they have the legal ability, the legal authority to be able to inject you with a vaccine if and when there is a vaccine available. And coincidentally, vaccines are currently being worked on. And that's not also including the possibility of a universal vaccine, the idea of which has recently been put out in both the news media and in the cultural media. These are all examples of the extent to which your state will go to protect itself. It sees the populace as not only the resource to enable itself, you are the fuel that powers the state system. The Queen does not go around the country doing all the bureaucratic legwork to make society turn. There's lots of other, there's a whole pyramid of subdivisions of people working in those bureaucratic jobs. I use the Queen just as the example to try and make the point that power does not magically emanate out of a single being. When a monarch says, I want my country to all wear seatbelts, does the monarch magically appear next to everyone in a vehicle and say, "Oi, mate, put your seatbelt on"? No, they didn't. The only way things occur in reality is because that order or that idea that gets professed by the monarch, the leader, the prime minister, whatever, gets passed from one to another, to another, to another. And it's the actual people on the street, the people at the end of the shovel, that do the actions that cause that thing to happen. It's another example of how power does not exist in that hierarchical pyramid system. It's all based on an illusion of authority. The real power is in your actions within the world that you live in. The other main reason I wanted to point at a lot of this stuff, connecting it to what we're being shown about the spread of the chronic virus, is, we can have that debate about whether it's real, where it comes from, what it's supposed to be, and all this kind of shit. But when it comes down to it, really, it's how do people react to it? And what policies are being enabled and enacted upon based on the fear that's being generated and the public's reaction to that fear. A good portion of the public now has fully acquiesced to the idea of having checkpoints, having entire towns or cities isolated and quarantined, people being tracked and traced so that you can prove whether you've been tested for the virus or not. Have you got your little yellow star to prove that you're virus clean? I use the yellow star deliberately as an analogy connection. It's a symbolic connection to the concept of being that registered unit within a machine, a mechanized system. Removes the human connection, human to human. They've been putting out talking pieces suggesting that you should stay 6 feet apart and things like that. And a lot of the public, in their reaction to it, seemingly, and you've got to allow for the fact that I'm talking about things that are being presented by the mainstream media primarily, but you can find evidence on alternative, independent media, etc. The general public's reaction has been to chase after that fear, that carrot. You better go and raid the supermarkets now because everything's going to be sold out. Why is everybody going out and buying masks when they've told you directly that this thing can spread beyond you wearing a mask? So having a mask is pretty much pointless unless you have got an illness and you're trying to stop yourself from coughing and sneezing on other people. But if you don't have it yet, wearing a mask is not really going to protect you from catching it. It's going to be a really minimal amount of protection. It's just, you might as well put a full paper suit on. And that's part of that fear that they're relying on. This, again, is an example of the extents to which your state will go to utilize propaganda via the media, and that includes cultural media, TV shows and movies that cover these kind of subjects like contagion and outbreak, so that then they can manipulate the public in a problem reaction solution, as Ike calls it, that Hegelian dialectic, to get people to give away their authority to a third party who says, "Oh, we'll deal with it for you." They then introduced another third party, that dirty turd. But this now is a clear demonstration of the extent that they will go to And for a lot of the public out there, I hope that this kind of stuff now is starting to build up to a big enough pile of evidence so that you can start calling this thing for what it is, seeing the reality of this thing, growing out of the imposed delusion, what becomes a self-perpetuating Stockholm syndrome delusion of, oh, they wouldn't do that, would they? Oh, no, it's just a mistake. It's just human fallibility. Somebody stamped the wrong rubber stamp on the form, and it's just a mistake. How big does your pile of evidence need to be for the state system and those that benefit from it truly, those that climb their way up the greasy pole to positions of so-called power, which really are just down to influence? For them, it benefits them to keep this system perpetuating as it is and to grind it towards an efficiency that separates them further from the masses. That's why we're getting bigger and bigger wealth gaps, because the angle of the pinnacle is getting higher and higher and higher. The distance between them and everybody else is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And for them, it's beneficial to keep that going. And the only way to keep that going is to keep the mass of the public trapped in a perpetual cycle of being the resource that actually fuels the system, while also being the main enemy, the actual direct enemy of the system. Because if you stop feeding it, it dies. If you try to escape it, it dies. So it can't let you go, but at the same time, your very existence is the biggest threat to it. Because by what you choose to do, you decide its fate. Like I said, if you decide to stop feeding it, it's going to die. So sort of me banging on about, that kind of example of like, look, this is what it is. See it for the reality that it is. That doesn't mean be in terror of it, but be aware of how it manipulates the public en masse, which includes you, includes me. It includes us. They want us to be convinced of these inversions and these delusions of authority, etc., because then we go along with the direction they want us to go. But me banging on about that kind of example brings me to the sort of conclusion of what I wanted to say, to try and at least help people see how being aware of this stuff should not be all just doom and gloom. It should give you more power. It should help you realize that the power is with you, not with some magical monarchy leader who goes, I want this to happen, and magic emanates out of them and causes the world to change. The real power lies with you. I was listening to Steve on Thursday. I was feeling a bit rough, so I wasn't exactly interacting in the chat room or anything, but I was listening. And at one point, he asked the question of how do you change the world? It's become a bit of a classic cliche. And I think it's a major stumbling point for a lot of people, because the system encourages us to have this concept of the hierarchical system, such that only if you're one of the big people at the top of the heap do you have the power to change the world. They need you to believe that, because that perpetuates the very concept of the hierarchy and gets you to support it. That Stockholm syndrome support of, we must need these really big people up there, because when they say things, the world happens, the world changes. So we must have, they've got to stay there so that they can cause the world to change. Whereas the reality is those changes only occur because all the people at the bottom of the pyramid actually start doing that thing. Therefore, the shape of the world changes. So how do you change the world? One choice at a time. I know it sounds ridiculously simplistic, but for me, it just helps. There's an old, I think, Buddhist proverb or Buddhist saying, or whatever, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And it's just to help you get your head around the idea that, well, any problem is approached one step at a time. It may seem insurmountable when you first look at it. When you look up that pyramid and you think, how am I going to move that pyramid from there to there? You go one brick at a time. The actual enacting that is required to cause the thing to happen is one brick at a time. That's good. That's going to make it happen. It might take a while, but it's going to make it happen. So the reality is, how do you change the world? One choice at a time. Do you choose to keep believing the illusion and trying to run that hamster wheel and trying to get enough money so that you can escape the system and all that kind of delusion? Or do you start making other choices? And they don't necessarily have to be big things. That's part of the delusion of you can't change it unless you're one of these big people. Unless you're somebody like Gandhi, you can't change the world. It's bullshit, mate. The choices you make change the world on a daily basis. You chose to tune in and listen to me talking, doing my broadcast thing. Yeah, that's a choice you made. Hopefully something I'm talking about, something we talk about, will help you in making choices for yourself that change your world. And the choices you make have an interacting epigenetic effect with everybody else around you in that shared space of this 3-4 dimensional reality that we all experience together. So this concept of you can't change the world unless you're somebody important, or unless you're doing something on such a big scale that the majority of the people can go, oh yeah, he actually changed the world. Oh yeah, he changed the world. Look, we can see the pyramids over there now. There is a short-sightedness to that perception, a lot of which relies on people's concept of time and their own, again, this is something that the system gives to us and fuels throughout our lives, their own egotistical desire to be the one that does the big change and to see it happen in their own lifetime, so they can stand on top of that heap and go, look at how I changed the world. I am Ozymandias. You know, that egotistical fueling of, oh yeah, I'm the Neo, I caused it to happen. It's little changes, little choices that you can make in everyday life. You might not see the culmination of those changes. It might be your children that see that culmination. It might be their children that see that culmination. But it is all those little steps that add up together. It's all those people en masse that cause the world to change. I can remember as a child getting in a car, getting in the car with my dad, driving around, nobody wore a seatbelt. Yeah, then they brought in the legal fines for wearing seatbelts. About the same time, my mum started making me wear a seatbelt every time I was in shotgun in the car. She's like, no, if you're going to sit shotgun, you got to wear your seatbelt. And I got into the habit of wearing a seatbelt in a car. And now you ask young people who, coming to the age where they can start independently driving their own vehicle or whatever, they'd probably find it difficult to conceive that 30, 40 years ago, hardly anybody wore a seatbelt. Whereas now it's considered just common sense and a good idea to put your seatbelt on. That wasn't because a monarch went, oh, magic, make everybody wear a seatbelt. Boom, I'll change the world. No, it's because people started en masse to take up that idea. Some of them because they were worried about getting fined. But for a lot of people, it's like, oh, yeah, actually, that makes sense. Yeah, look at how it reduces the number of deaths, etc. Yeah, I'll put my seatbelt on. The world changes in lots of little steps en masse. That's that scale of things. And sometimes the changes don't occur within your lifetime. That doesn't mean you shouldn't keep working towards them. Plant a tree, knowing full well that you might never live to see that tree grow to full maturity. but you've got the mental cognitive ability and the spiritual connective ability to be able to conceive of the fact that in the future, as long as no arsehole comes along and cuts it down, in the future there will be a mature tree there that you planted. So, the fact that you don't get to see it while you're still alive, does that mean you therefore shouldn't plant the tree? Yeah, that's a really nihilistic and short-sighted thinking, which the system would like us to do. But don't buy into that bullshit. Yeah. I worded it another way. It's that it's a bit of a word salad. The gravity of the granular flow. The gravity that is created by the mass of people doing something. So if from now on everybody decided to all start drinking tea only and no coffee at all ever, then the coffee industry would go out of business in this country and the tea industry would shoot somebody. I'm using very simplistic analogies, but hopefully you get the idea. The world changes because people start doing things differently or seeing things differently. It doesn't change because some leader somewhere says, make it so. Yeah. Anyway, I think I've ranted enough. Hopefully that made sense of how I was connecting those 2-3 stories. What's been going on with the coronavirus recently. Go on, Pete.
Well, yeah, I've just been listening. Yeah, very good. Like I say, with the words and ideas can change the world. That's how things change. And it is that was exactly how you said it. Thing I was sort of thinking is the opposite. What they're trying to do, the positive is that us knowing we can achieve these things, we can get things done. What they're trying to do is change the social behaviors for the negative, aren't they? Or get, I think,
to suit the perpetuation of the system. They're trying to herd us into a position where our very existence is part of that system structure. So it becomes a self-perpetuating descent into dystopia.
And it's more aimed at the youth more than ever, because they've been also told recently that there's only 11 years left before the planet blows up. If we don't turn our lights off now, they've got the fear of the COVID-19 virus. And all this is, and then the weather, of course, kids watch, it's all aimed at, fearing the whole generation out,
Climate change will cause more viruses. If they haven't said that already, I guarantee that will be part of the talking points.
Yeah, and don't get too close to people, like you say. Stop shaking hands. That'll be a social behavioural change, maybe going forward. Don't do that. That's not good. Don't touch anybody.
Do it virtually. Why do you need to touch bodily when you can just say hello to your mate virtually and stay 6 feet away from them?
I saw some terrible subliminals the other day. Yeah, I was watching the football after the internet the other day. It was a late match, and I swear to God, man, all 6 adverts at the halfway time had people using phones. All right, 2 of the adverts were for apps. Yeah, but then they got an advertisement for beer. They're all sitting in the fucking pub drinking beers, but they're all on their phones, tapping the results to a friend or something. I don't know what, But every single advert had a phone, and only 2 of them were about phones. Yeah, it was just...
in an oddly synchronistic fashion, I was thinking, the image I use is like the thumbnail for the broadcast that from the rally in Germany, the Landermat, I think it's called, whatever. The bunch of people all doing the Nazi salute. I was thinking, one of the days I wouldn't mind having a go at seeing if I can Photoshop a phone into everybody's hand, the hand they're holding up in the salute, just to sort of try and make the point about that kind of phone zombie effect.
Oh man, I've seen another advert on the television here, where there's this guy with a cold, and he doesn't, it's advertising those little stop the cold for 12 hours jobs. Yeah, it just bungs your nose. It's like putting a bit of super glue up your nose or something. Yeah, with something 12 hours. So what does he do? Well, he's at the football match with his kid at school. Yeah, and his kid scores a goal, and he's like, achoo. And then he looks up, with his phone ready to catch at the moment. Oh, but he missed it because of his cold. Yeah, I mean, come on, you don't want to cold people. You might miss something. You might miss taking a photo with your phone cam. Yeah, No, if you want to know if this whole thing is what's the word I'm looking for? If you want to know if it's all contrived or whatever, Saturn and Pluto, yeah, they went conjunct. Do you remember? I was talking about that all through 2019. The biggest event 2019 was January the 12th, 2020, when Saturn and Pluto went conjunct, and that was literally the first day of the outbreak. Yeah, so. It's contrived, obviously. I like this site. I only just discovered this today. I didn't know that you could do this, but you can put it on one day at a time. This is today's March 2nd, yeah? So
I was just going to say, do you mean the 20th would have been when they announced it internationally? Because the first
12th.
case supposedly was in early December in China.
Oh, yeah. I looked up the 12th and they said China had confirmed the case or something, yeah? So it's pretty much about that. Yeah, I'll go forward with this because it's interesting. I only just discovered this today. The red lines are not so good. Yeah, but then we get some good days about March 8th. Oh, by the way, that was it just then. Yeah. Mercury finished retrograde on the 7th or the 8th. No, there it is. On the 10th. March finishes its retrograde. Yeah. I think it's start looking a bit better. Yeah?
I didn't mention it as well at the start of this episode being on the 2nd of the 3rd here in the UK. But if you're in the US, then because you put the month before the day, it's actually 3222. It's another sort of coincidental, convenient timing, numerology, etc.
But Saturn moving into Aquarius is not necessarily such a good thing. It can be a bit dreamy, yeah. And Saturn prefers to be with its feet on the ground. Yeah. But anyway, they know what's happening. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. Are you suggesting that it's a large scale processing that's happening because of the conjunction with Saturn?
Oh yeah, I think they chose that moment to let it loose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, a lot of 2019 was a lot of the truth movement people were saying, "Oh, we're beginning to gather momentum. Yeah, next year will be a good one. Next year we're really going to get people to wake up." And so they're starting to move their machine a bit faster.
I would have said I agree with you, but I'm thinking as well that like last year to me seemed very much a kind of, you could see the fences being pulled in. That's why I'm surprised that we haven't seen more direct effects yet this year in terms of the curtailing of a lot of what goes on the internet. There has been some, but I was expecting it to be much more heavy-handed kind of thing. There has been those changes in YouTube and Google policies that give them the power to be much more aggressive in doing that kind of controlling stuff, but they don't seem to have really gone heavily into it.
I don't think they want people to turn off. That's why they're offering BitChute and all the others. They want people to slowly migrate away from the mainstream and keep, remain online. They don't want, a couple of 100,000 people saying, "That's it, fuck the internet. I'm going to start living a real life." Because they could actually cause a lot of trouble if they did, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, incidentally, Derek Bros from the, what's it called?
Conscious resistance.
Yeah. He had a video up the other day on BitChute, how to use the Freedom Cells website, yeah? And he's just opened up this new website where you can join up and you can get in touch with people in your area, yeah? That's
I thought it'd been going for a while.
yeah, he had one before, but the guy that was running it messed it up, yeah? And now he's got this new site. I've signed up to it. Yeah? Just put down the location. They've got a map so you can check out people that are near you. So far, there's only about 3 people in Europe. There's only about 70 or 80 people joined. But I thought I'd tell you about this because it seems like a good idea. Yeah. Even if you just meet up with a bunch of people and go, searching through the hedgerows, or you swap, addresses for decent health food shops. You can maybe think of something that you can do.
To a certain degree, but it's similar to the idea that Max Egan was pushing a couple of years ago. I can't remember the name of it now.
Oh, the circle. Full Circle
Yeah.
Project.
Yeah, that was it. Similar kind of thing. And to me, it's sort of like, well, you don't need to specify a platform or a method of doing this kind of stuff. The internet technology has given us more options of how to connect with other people. So you don't necessarily need to create a very specific sort of location to do this kind of activity. If anything, doing so acts like a honeypot for the arseholes. Not only potential government infiltration, but also people that are basically just not the kind of people you want to be involved with. They might be scammers. They might be deliberately trying to entrap people so that they can scam them by selling them some snake oil bullshit or whatever. There are plenty of ways for you to connect with like-minded people across the internet and without the internet. That having specific locations, to me, it's more of a risk than it is a benefit.
Well, I think it's something like the Full Circle Project. It was like it's something that is gonna at some point in time attract people's attention. People are gonna say, "Look, now it's time to do something," and maybe now it is. Yeah, and the way I envision it is just get a group of people and see if you can, like I say, go out into the hedgerows, yeah, to pick food, or make models that you can sell on the street.
I don't know. Maybe this is a bit more appropriate to the UK. I don't know how prevalent it is in other countries, but you could try doing things like joining your local rambling group. You'll probably find people who are interested in rambling would also have an interest in things like hedgerows and gathering naturally grown food and other stuff out of the wilderness, etc. Again, you don't need to have a specific place to go and look for this is where I'll go and join the Truther get-together club. Do you see what I mean? To me, it's like, if anything, you're creating a rod for your own back, and you're creating a self-entrapment process, if that makes sense.
Whatever you do, they're going to say, "Oh, Cookie is going to join this rambling club." They're going to know about it anyway. It's the way I look at it. Yeah,
I'm not talking about the governmental agencies. I'm just talking about people in general.
Well,
one of the best ways for scammers to target victims is by going to social groupings where they know that kind of victim turns up. So, for example, a scammer who's learned the con trick of tricking elderly people out of money to have their central heating fixed or some shit like that. Where does he go to find new victims? This is what I mean. People who have that kind of mindset will look at something like this as being a way of locating potential victims to whatever bullshit they want to try and sell them. This is also a common tactic used by network sellers, like the gold and silver paper bullshit sellers. He's a prepper. I bet I can sell him some paper bonds that he thinks he owns gold from, shit like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, just check people out as you meet them, yeah? If you think somebody's there scamming, just say to them, "Man, I'm not here to be scammed."
That again is true on whatever platform you use to communicate with people. You don't have to go somewhere specific to do that.
But what I'd also say is, if you want to join a rambling group, you've probably got fucking retired police officers on that rambling group. You've probably got the worst kind of fucking mentality people there, yeah? Home counties Labrador walkers.
It was one quick example, mate, that related to your talking about gathering stuff from hedgerows.
What would be better is if you betted that money and it came up, and you met somebody who actually knows a lot about hedgerow plants, and now you can start putting advertisements out, not scamming people, but charging people for the stuff that you're learning as you go along, and get a whole group where you can teach that. There are places in England where that's illegal. You're not allowed to charge people for helping them pick from the hedges, but
I think things like this, where you have a specific, I mean, it really is only relevant to online, using internet technology. Stuff like this is great for organising projects, as in getting people of like mind together and talking about how you could enact something. Yeah, but I'm highly dubious about using this kind of setup as a way to meet people directly. I don't think it's a good option. It's like going to your local train station in the hope that you're going to meet somebody that has similar interests. Yeah. There's that truther club effect as well that I don't like. For years now, I've talked about what I think, anyway, the reality that there is no truth movement like a club that you join. This, to me, is the similar kind of effect where people will feel like they've joined the club kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, there are plenty of people there who are no good. I saw James Corbett interviewing Dan Dix today about YouTube censorship, and Dan Dix was putting up Ezra Levant as an example because he wrote a book and the Canadian government wanted to interview him about this book because it was criticising Justin Trudeau. And I'm thinking, come on, Corbett, you know better than that. It was deliberate. He was the patsy who was put there to supposedly answer the difficult questions so that they could then go and do it to everybody else. But they weren't going to touch Ezra Levant's money or his freedom. Yeah, he was just playing the part, which, some people say Assange was. Assange, I'm not so sure. I think he might have just been very naive but a genuine person because of the way they've gone after him and some of the history I saw of, WikiLeaks and the way it came out. I mean, like Greenwald. You remember Greenwald?
Yeah, Greenwald.
Well, he was a genuine person, I think, because when you look at what happened to The Guardian, that was the excuse for MI6 to go into The Guardian, take those hard drives, and it was never the same again, was it? Yeah, it was basically the end for mainstream journalists to do any kind of investigative journalism. That was the end there. They said, all right, we'll have enough of this. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was more about shifting people away from old paradigm news reporting. Because that's all he's same as, Josephine Twatson, setting up his own independent news company now. So people are getting pushed more and more into sub-sect tribalistic groupings. Greenwald basically just did the same thing. I agree with you. He might have been genuinely independent and in effect got corralled and railroaded into that position, but he served a purpose that was very suitable to the system. Thank you very much. And he still pushes a lot of propaganda bullshit. He still acts as an official mouthpiece a lot of the time.
That Paul Joseph Watson's an embarrassment. I don't know what's worse, you know what I mean? He's Hollyoaks hairdo, or he's that stupid beard that just looks ridiculous on him, or the 100 edits that he needs to do, like a 2-minute piece to camera regular, you know what I mean? But I can see how he's played his part. Like he's made a push to the right, but it's this Hegelian dialectic, left-right bullshit, because the woke ideology, it's ridiculous, you know what I mean? These illiberal liberals, they're doing the right's job for them, you know what I mean? But that's intentionally what's happening. They're just two cheeks of the same arse, man, you know what I mean? And then when it comes to like changing the world or whatever, just think you don't need a green screen or a condenser mic or anything like that. You don't need a logo. You just need an internet connection or a camera, the right idea, the passion, whatever you want to say.
Yeah. Exactly, Dave.
Part of the reason why I carried on doing this in this kind of format, part of my reasoning, however many years ago now, fucking 10 years ago, whatever.
Getting on for there now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was that, make it obvious to anybody looking, any audience, that, I'm not doing anything special. There's no editing, there's no fancy studio setup or nothing like that. No, it's just a webcam and a headset and an internet connection. So this is accessible to a lot of people. To me, it was about making it obvious that you don't need to just sit back and be subjected to this stuff. But also there's there's an element of how can I describe it? It's setting a low bar, yeah, and that works in a beneficial way in sort of like two directions. One is I ain't exactly failing by much if I fail. Yeah, because it's only a low bar of expectation. It's like I ain't trying to do any fancy graphics. So if the picture's a bit rough, it's like, well, yeah, you know, it's easy to sort of say, you know, oh, that's just the way it is because it's a, you know, lo-fi kind of setup.
That's the punk ethos, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
but it also gives me a little bit of a an escape clause from the kind of responsibility, I suppose, really is what it comes down to. The escape clause of responsibility of like, well, look, I've told you I'm an amateur. I've told you I'm not an expert in anything. So if I get something wrong, it's just, well, I got it wrong. You know, so it reduces the bar as well for me in that sense of I can easily achieve and I can easily, you know, accept the failures because the bar is so low. Any failure is not going to be anything major, you know, if that makes sense. It's not like I'm selling tickets at £100 a time to a multi-seat venue and then I do crap on the performance and people are disappointed. It's like, no, the bar is this low, folks, so you're quite welcome to be disappointed.
Exactly. Listen, just to stay on Infowars for a second, right? But you can see the role that Watson's played, you know, but it's bringing everybody over to the right a wee bit, footballism. And then Alex Jones, he's played his role of an alternative voice equating psychosis with his mental break with Sandy Hook, you know?
Yeah, and I think this is all links into what you said before about Tavistock and think tanks and how they go in there and they put these characters there, you know, via, you know, in America, then over here as well. We see various, like I say, them trying to change your thinking and then take it to extremes, which they do a lot. And Alex Jones was definitely that, wasn't he? And he, you know, like they do this, and they knew. We said this 8, 9, nearly 10 years ago now. You know, they knew this was coming. They had all their little things already set up. What they were going to throw at us, what they were going to try and dismantle your thinking. You know, and trying to get you into their thinking, into their wrong thinking. And change your social behaviors and everything. That's what they've been trying to do that whole time because they knew this information age was coming. So they were well prepared for it and they were there and have managed it all the way, or they think they have. But, you know, we do see, you know, the fear still, and it's out there massively without doubt, you know, and people are paying attention, unfortunately, to some of the agendas that they're pushing, you know, at the moment. And, you know, eugenics being the big. It's funny because I remember it was about 6 weeks ago. I remember just showing an image of eugenics just to remind people eugenics again. Remember what really this is all about. Really, you know, in a sense of them wanting to completely control, dominate via whatever methods they see fit. You know, through the air, through your health, through the media, through whatever, to get you into thinking in their way, so they can manipulate you into, you know, being depressed and all kinds of, you know, there's a lot. It's such a deep subject. You can't just explain it in 20 minutes or whatever. You know, you have to go and look at people like Aldous Huxley and do some reading, go back and look at the way in which all this has been set up. And way before him as well, there's always been a clique who want to sort of experiment on us, it seems, and manipulate us for their own ends and their own power, like you say, power.
Keeping control of the influence, because it's the influence that gives them the supposed power. Yeah. Because that's something else that I think has, over the last few years, has been, I want to say direct evidence, but I know for many people, because it doesn't stand out obviously right in front of their face, they don't consider it to be direct evidence. But the very fact that they have spent so much time and effort and money trying to control what people are talking about, trying to control or curtail or manipulate the exchange of information, so interfering with people doing that thing or trying to manipulate what is allowed out on the internet, that is proof, that is direct proof that talking about things with each other has a direct effect on the reality you live in. Because we exchange information and we change our behaviors based on the information we're taking in. They know that full well. So influence over others, which could be just you and your family, you and your next door neighbours, you know, influence over others doesn't mean you like Bojo, the Prime Minister or whatever, but they know that we all influence each other. So they have to get in there and manipulate what we're saying to each other, and if we're even allowed to say anything to each other. That is direct proof that talking about things is part of the process of changing the world.
Like Peter said,
sometimes it wouldn't. It doesn't matter how much you say or how many books you read or how many websites you would direct them to. It's like there is none so blind as those who will not see. Like that ethos, Liverpool, Care Pathway, Grenville, non-accountable, third-party corporate manslaughter, fascist ideology. See, that mindset is too much for a lot of people to address when it comes to understanding the control system. It's like too frightening.
A lot of that goes back to, you know, the destruction of the unions, the destruction of people who just a basic attitude that we're all a part of society and we all have a part to play. And the Century of the Self came in, and the Century of the Self, that long documentary, that reinforces what Peter was saying. They've been doing it for ages, you know. Like they got rid of the unions because they wanted to, you know, stop people feeling like they're a collective, yeah. And then they started giving them ego and giving them fashions to follow. And the transgender is the latest fashion that is going to isolate somebody. You're going to be you. You're going to be your true self, but pretty much all on your own, except for a bunch of people who are egging you on. Yeah, and I mean, there are so many reasons, like you say, Grenfell, but then people, you know, they've just gotten out of the habit of caring for other people in their community, because you had people like Superhard in the 80s, wasn't it? Early 80s. Yeah, you had the working class, like, I'm all right, I've still got a job, I've got loads of money, and they started to, you know, split up everybody into the lower class and the unemployed class, perpetually unemployed class. Yeah, so I mean, there's multiple reasons for it.
Yeah, and it is a long thread.
And that
building up from over a century, really.
Yeah, that film I saw today, Stalker, 1979 Russian film. So it was made during the time when the Soviets were still in control, and these guys have been so beaten down by the system where you cannot criticize the system, that they're having to put all their feelings into words. And some of the philosophy these guys are coming out with, well, no one man can do anything to change the world, which, you know, one of you just mentioned just now. Yeah, and this is the philosophy that has been hammered into them by the Soviets.
Yeah,
and it's amazing.
And the other agenda they pushed a while back was this overpopulation thing. The planet's too populated, and they were saying that back in the 60s. Was being put out there in the mainstream media, because that's an interview with Aldous Huxley, which I saw, and that's the first thing he asked him: what are the main problems in today's world that we face? And his answer was, "There's too many people here. We need to control the populations." You know, that's exactly what he said. So that's the thing that you say, Gary. They've been pushing on us and putting that into your mind. You know, we're you know, and now we're just basically a scourge on the planet because we're causing the planet to heat up. It's our fault. You know, we're to blame for climate. You know, this is all the Greta Thunberg agenda, climate and all that. All part of the same thing, you know.
But the main person to blame for I don't know, overpopulation is really a problem, but the main person from stopping that argument from actually being put to the public in a common sense fashion was the church. Yeah, there was no way they was going to allow birth control, and you're talking about the whole of South America, yeah, big swathes of Europe, yeah, and they're going to have birth control, not the church, yeah. So there was no rational argument about that. I suppose that's deliberate because, you know, if people had started talking about it with a bit of common sense, they would have said, well, it's not really such a problem after all. Yeah. So again, the whole thing was a gaslighting effect. Oh, we need to reduce populations, but we can't because of the church, and they won't reduce populations.
Yeah.
You know, and
Well, it's came,
do.
it came the full circle with the church because it's the new religion, the climate alarmism, you know, with St. Greta to avert the Great Flood that's caused by the original sin of your carbon footprint. You can avert that from happening by paying green taxes, you know what I mean? So it's like, it came full circle there.
Well, the Pope, he might very well have the chronic virus. So maybe he'll disappear off the scene and Greta will take his place. You have a whole new church of climate science, or climate bullshit.
Well, she was at Bristol, wasn't she? Was it the weekend? She appeared in the UK at some big event, and I did see a story. I just glanced at it today. The headline saying that people were unhappy at the damage that they caused at the event. You know, all the grass verges were all wrecked. You know, where people had, you know, so many thousands of people had gone there, so they'd done the opposite. They're the ones causing the damage. They're the ones, you know, the irony of it all.
And she's talking about screaming about the earth being on fire and it's pissing down in Bristol.
Yeah, I know. Same old thing coming out with the same. But the kids are listening to this. You know, the youth, the younger ones. I think, you know, that's where, you know, when they get to, you know, adulthood, you know, the type of programming they've been under when you're younger. You know, when I was younger, I think in the 70s it would have been what was on TV. There was wars going on. I didn't really understand, you know, when you're little and stuff. But there didn't seem to be anything major apart from Elvis dying, and that was, you know, I don't know. Maybe the Vietnam War was going on, I think, but I wasn't. Again, there was stuff happening you weren't aware of. But if someone said to you as a 6, 7-year-old or 10-year-old that there's a virus out there and people are dying, and they see this on the news constantly because they've got access to the internet, as we know, as we said, every kid, you know, has got the pads, got all the, so they've got access to this information. It's all being splattered everywhere, so they're getting all of this and the climate stuff just recently. So now, you know, most of them won't want to go to school or go out or anything. They'll be, you know, that's the sort of effect it's having. And that's the social behavior stuff as well, the controlling. So the kids will get normalized to not being close to each other and being very suspicious of each other. This is all that kind of generation being programmed with this.
Oh yeah, that was the guy, David Abel, on the. Can you screen share me, Cookie, please? The guy who was on the whatchamacallit, on the cruise ship. In the Daily Mirror, he's wearing a T-shirt that says "Don't trust anyone." Now, anyway, this is a website from a group here in Barcelona, and I missed this last month. I wish I'd met up with them, in fact, because they had a campaign against the Mobile Phone World Congress, which didn't go ahead because of the coronavirus, and they're all about saving the environment. Yeah, a bunch of anarchists. But the interesting thing about these. There is no mention of global warming or Greta on their website. Yeah, just, you know, pollution and 5G pollution, and actually they go more on about the effects of workers in the third world. Yeah, because, you know, anarchists can be very ideological, but they're right about that. Yeah, I mean, you know, Africa's been raped to keep all these phones going, the lithium and well, whatever else it is that they use. Yeah, cobalt. But anyway, they had some meetings here, ended in February, yeah? They was going to have one on February 26th. But they might have cancelled it, yeah? So I should have gone along to that if I had one, but, you know, no new news on that. But, you know, there are people who are not fooled by the global warming thing and Greta, yeah? And actually going out there and sort of trying to put the truth out there.
Yeah.
The pollution.
Yeah,
I think they do their best to absolutely bechild her as well, you know, like keep her in like the wee furry hat and the fucking the southwestern on and all that, you know, as if she's like 12 years of age or something. She's 17.
News today, yeah, I won't put it up there, but there's this cartoon of Greta from behind, her pigtails, and somebody's holding onto the pigtails and like raping her from behind. And she went on to Twitter saying, "Oh, if they're making cartoons like this, it must be because I'm winning." I thought, "Oh, Jesus Christ, man!" Yes.
Probably done by our
sometimes
supporters. Probably drew by our supporters, you know, like to generate like sympathy towards her.
absolutely, because there is no. When I looked at the article, there was no saying where it had actually come from. I don't think. Oh yeah, it was on the site of a Canadian oil company, I think. Yeah, somebody put it up.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, that is so script. It's too much.
Yeah, but
Right.
that feeds back into that other agenda, though, doesn't it? You talking about last week about the Twitter and the way in which people are now abusing it so much that more will come in to stop all that abuse. Again, we're playing into that. Everything's gonna shut down. Greta's horrified. I mean, that's a horrific. I mean, that's a horrible thing to post, is it not? That kind of thing. I mean, what's going on in people's heads, for goodness sake? It's that kind of thing. So people are gonna accept more controls within social media, and if you put anything, they'll bring legislation out to stop all this. I mean, they're doing it now. It's already happening. It is. And it depends on what you put on Facebook or wherever. You can be arrested still. Or someone can be complaining about you, whatever, something that you've written about or you've commented on Twitter. So it's still going on. So I don't know why they're letting things slip. It's interesting, isn't it? Maybe they're just going to hammer down on some big legislation not so far away. All linked into the virus stuff as well, and everything else. Fake information, fake news, and
yeah. The reason there, Pete, is because you just said it. Legislation. I saw a video the other day. The guy who was actually visited by the cops. He runs a little factory. Yeah, like this sounds like an industrial factory unit. And he put something up about a woman's a woman and a man's a man, and that's the end of it. So the police beat him saying, well, you made an anti-trans tweet. And the guy was like, what? You're joking? He says, I run a factory, like. And they said, well, we're concerned that your factory might not be a transgender-friendly place. And it's a fucking workshop factory, mate. What do you expect? But the whole interview he did literally put across to the viewer that it's very difficult for them to legislate. And now they can already do it, but if they do, that would be the corporations showing their hand. Oh, YouTube, we don't like you. We're going to ban you because it's our platform and we can do that. And we've said that all along. They can do it if they want, but they want more than that. The government wants that legislation. But, a bar banning you from drinking in their bar and then sort of like, it's different from legislation that you can't ever go into another bar. It's different, yeah? The individual pub could do it. But to bring in legislation and say you tried to go in that pub and buy a beer, you're overage, it's legal, but they just don't like you, so we're going to arrest you. No, you can't do that, yeah? If they don't want you on Twitter, okay, but it's not an arrestable offence. You see, it's very difficult for them to push the legislation through and to make it into law because it won't stand up. It wouldn't stand up, if you see what I mean.
But it may affect your future credit score.
Yeah, that's how we'll do it, yeah.
I seen recently there was something came up on the feeds that there was a group, a Republican group, they were looking to buy out Jack Dorsey and Twitter and looking to make changes to all that sort of woke scolding that's going on.
There probably will be that kind of corporate amalgamation eventually. A lot of these platforms, it's been a while since we spoke about this kind of thing, the new concept that the internet is a human right. Therefore there should be services provided, and how there is that, again, a kind of revelation of the corporatist infrastructure by people talking about how a service such as Google or Facebook should be there no matter what. It should be provided for by the state. So that kind of stuff is sort of being still being pushed constantly, and that's dragging people back into that virtual world again, or the concept that their existence is only part of that virtual world.
The big question for me there is, who becomes the arbiter of morality in this age of allegation that we're living in? Because everything these days gets played out in the court of public opinion with these social justice mobs.
I could see it. sorry, I could see it becoming possibly already is possible, that what you'll end up with is there won't exactly be a final arbiter of truth. Instead, what will occur is the supposed offender will find themselves stuck in a perpetually circling Kafka-esque environment where they get passed from one to the next, awaiting judgment or trial. But in that process, their ability or their allowance to post, their social credit score kind of thing is affected, such that they end up in this limbo. So in effect, they have been condemned without the system having to put itself in a position of being the arbiter and therefore being able to be questioned about their judgment. Instead, they just keep passing the book, and the person's stuck in this limbo, just going round and round. That is possible now with the internet technology. So you could spend, half your life trying to protest your innocence, or even just trying to find out what it is that you're actually supposedly being accused of or prosecuted for. And during that time, you're removed from the general public discourse. So as far as the system's concerned, you've been dealt with. That process that a few years ago, they started admitting how the algorithms were potentially creating problems because of how they funneled people into narrower and narrower viewpoints. They basically turned people into extremists, supposedly. And I know, we talked about this over the years, and it's about creating that perception in the public mind, so the public will willingly agree to people being controlled in this environment because they're extremists. But at the same time, that's a way that they are getting people stuck into that kind of cyclical motion of you feel like you're taking part in something, but you're so shadow banned and algorithmically suppressed that you only see a little kind of cul-de-sac of an environment, whereas the rest of the public is down the road in the market square. You think you're participating in that market square, but you're not, because the algorithm and the shadow banning is keeping you away from public view.
Probably why channels are still here, isn't it?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
I do think that it's partly because we provide a certain outlet that they tolerate us, basically. They know they can keep us pushed to the back, as it were, cul-de-saced and shadow banned and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that we're still here doing our thing acts as a venting outlet for a certain number and demographic of people that they know are looking for certain kinds of content on this platform. I hope people, I'm pretty confident that most of the people that tune in to listen to us are aware of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I know.
But for the general sort of passing public, that might stumble across these broadcasts, they might not twig that the system is quite happily utilizing that kind of process. That links us back to the Adam Curtis stuff again, like the hypernormalization. The system can tolerate little outlets like this. I think it was Gary mentioned a few weeks ago. It's like the court jester. The atrocities of the monarch are alleviated or vented from the public angst through the court jester taking the piss out of the monarch. So the public feel that their angst has been vented because the court jester has called the monarch a dickhead or whatever. But the reality is the system still keeps grinding on.
Yep. Keep paying your taxes.
Right. And talking about grinding on, I think I need to wind it up. I'm losing my voice and I'm losing control of not coughing too much now.
Talking about grinding on, yeah. I'm lucky enough to live in Barcelona where we can get a kilo of hemp seeds, yeah, for £5. And I put them in a pestle and mortar the other day, and they're absolutely beautiful. It's like chopped nuts, like chopped hazelnuts, but sweeter. Really, really nice. And I've got some chocolate as well, chocolate beans, and I put them in a pestle and mortar. And it's just really nice, but a little bit bitter. So you have another bit, and it's sweet, and it's nice, and it's a bit bitter. So you have another bit, and another bit, and another bit. It's nice. It's really, really fucking nice chocolate.
Yeah, cocoa addict.
It's 40 times stronger in antioxidants, raw chocolate. Yeah, and this stuff has just got super mega protein. So, along with ginger, which I haven't gotten any yet, I haven't bought any ginger yet to boost my immune system. But think of your health, get a few things to treat yourself. Ginger tea every day.
Yeah, put down the pot noodle.
And don't forget, wash your hands.
Yeah.
Soya. I mean, the first time I ever heard of soya was in the late 70s or 80s. And they said, oh, it's the new diet wonder food because your body can only digest about 20% of it. And the rest goes through. You'll be able to eat as much as you want, but your body just won't digest it. Yeah, that's the same soya that they're putting in everything today because Europeans don't have the enzyme to break it down properly. Unbelievable.
Cellulose filler.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a quick hello to the people I can see in the chat room, allowing for the fact that my chat room won't scroll all the way back to the beginning. So if I miss you out, sorry, it's just I'm going to just scroll down what I can see. Paula, hello, hope you're feeling better. And New Being, hello. And Tazzy, thanks for putting the links in. And Bright, hello. Neuro Paradise, hello. And Stewie, oh, it's Stewie. Sorry, being silly. I'm scrolling down. I know I saw a few other names in there earlier. Thanks for joining us in the chat tonight, joining in if you choose to. It's not a requirement, but you're welcome to join in the chat if you want to. I'm sorry, I haven't read much of the chat really, apart from seeing Tazzy's comment earlier. Dave Iron, hello. I think nearly back at the bottom of the chat box. And I said hello to you. And hello to everybody else who's joining in, like watching afterwards, after the live broadcast, the time travelers that tune in after. Yeah, I think I scrolled all the way down. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully I'll be back again next week. We'll be back on Wednesday night as well on Reality Chat on Reality Chat channel.
Yep.
I'll see how much croaking I can do. If just so like people's awareness of what's going on and whatever. My health has been somewhat up and down recently. I got caught out and got soaking wet in the storm the other week. That made me really ill. So the last couple of weeks I've been trying to recover from that. If my health continues on a decline, I might very well change what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Because if I can't sustain doing a live broadcast, then it's not really worth carrying on with them. I'll do something different. I might do pre-recorded videos or whatever. But yeah, we'll see. I'll just carry on as I can and adapt to the new environment as and when I need to. But yes, we'll certainly be talking about something at some point. Wednesday night Reality Chat, Thursday night Steve Tagoose and Misty Channel, and please don't forget there's lots of other channels out there doing good stuff, so keep looking, keep thinking and keep talking. We can still talk at the moment, just about, in between coughing. Hive Mind Concussion, hello, just saw you pop in the channel, and please stop the ride, hello. Thanks for joining in. Thanks again, folks. I will see you again soon, hopefully. Cheers.
Thanks, Cookie. Cheers, all.
Click the button.
Good night.
Yeah.